Good afternoon, everyone. A little bit later today because we've been through a couple of, a long meeting of the House K-12 Education Committee, which doesn't have to end at a definite time, as well as several other meetings. So I'll start. Mark Tallman with KASB, and I had the opportunity to testify today remotely in the Senate Education Committee, the House K-12 Budget Committee, which held hearings on two bills that were really identical. They both deal with the expanding the existing tax credit scholarship for low-income students, which, in a nutshell, the state provides tax credits for people who give contributions to organizations that make scholarships to students in private schools who have been in a public school. And here's what the bill does. Currently, to be eligible to get a scholarship, you have to be free lunch eligible. The bill would increase it to include reduced lunch. And more critically, or more key, you have to be attending one of the lowest performing on state tests 100 elementary schools. In other words, there's only students who are attending 100 public elementary schools that have the lowest test scores, which frankly mostly means they are some of the highest poverty schools in the state, are eligible. This bill would take away that restriction. It would be basically any free or reduced lunch public school student in a nutshell. The proponents were essentially saying, this won't really increase costs because we're not even spending all the money up to the cap, and it doesn't change the cap. That it's a good program. It helps kids do well. We heard from most of the money goes to, they have to be accredited schools. Most of it goes to Catholic schools. All the Catholic schools in Kansas are accredited. And essentially, they were in saying, good schools will helping parents. This would help us help more. The opponents, KASB and many others, essentially argued that you should not be using public funds to support programs that are limited to only some students. And really, and I'll shut up in a minute and let my colleagues respond. The proponents' argument was, well, we don't really discriminate. We help all the kids we can. We have poor kids. We have minority kids. We have special ed kids. And this would help us do more. The proponent's concern is to saying well-intentioned still may mean you're not able to reach the most difficult kids, the most expensive kids, and the concern is this creates a two-tier education system. I think it's pretty clear that there's a lot of support for these bills. I guess they're probably going to come out of committee, maybe as is, and this is only the first. We know there's a much more expansive bill that will perhaps be heard next week, but highlights of the day. Either of you guys want to add anything to that? Scott, you were watching other committees, but maybe following Twitter, and I know, Leah, you were also paying attention. Am I missing anything?
Well, I would say kind of the opposite of highlights. I'll have to say that I was pretty shocked at some of the rhetoric from some of the members of the committee when they were questioning some of the conferees. There were accusations that opponents were anti-Catholic bigots, and there was an observation that some of the female opponents looked fancy or looked expensive, I think, and they shouldn't be asking for more money for schools.
Well,
so I found
think in fairness, it was their homes that looked expensive.
Well, their homes looked expensive. Either way, I think we know what the subtext was, and I found that very disappointing.
Well, bottom line is discussion continues. There's a strong push for this from the private school community. Again, just facts are most of these are going to Catholic schools. They'd like to serve more kids. Strong support for that. A lot of concern on the public school side, and people, if you have a concern, whatever it is, you need to weigh in. Scott, we don't want to make this too long. Do you want to tell us the committee meetings that you were paying attention to?
Well, mine were not nearly as exciting. I was in House Education, and they're hearing an interesting bill. It's House Bill 2086, I believe, that deals with, it would allow schools to hold stocks of EpiPens and inhalation devices. I'm having trouble with my words, but currently this is kind of overseen within the schools. If they hold a stock of these, it's kind of overseen by pharmacists. And there are some pharmacists that don't want to get involved in this because of liability issues. So this would give school nurses a little bit more leeway to stock these EpiPens and inhalers. And so they heard it. The school nurses are for it, and they think it would save lives. I mean, it's an important bill. And so they heard that. They didn't take any action, and the committee chairman didn't say anything. They reviewed a couple of audits from previous years, English as a second language, and they reviewed the cash balances audit. Nothing, no real news there. I went to House Tax. They're hearing Senate Bill 13. This is a very wide-ranging kind of truth in taxation bill. Requires taxing entities to have hearings and notifications if they want to raise taxes above a certain amount. School districts are not, would not be subject to these requirements, but school districts are kind of dragged into the notification issue. So they would have to provide information on school property taxes on the notifications. So they're still hearing that bill, and it's a pretty significant piece of tax legislation.
It's an interesting trade-off because it would put in some new requirements for cities and counties and other local units, but it also repeals the tax lid, which cities and counties have really felt really handcuffed them. And so it's kind of saying, we're going to take this off, but we're going to make you share more information and I'll tell you what it comes down to. And school board members or others, what drives some legislators crazy if people say we didn't raise the mill levy, but to the taxpayer whose property values are going up, your tax, what you're paying in may go up. And so you're being truthful in saying we didn't raise the rate, but some people get really antsy about that. And so this is designed to say, okay, if you're going to be actually taking in more dollars, you kind of got to be upfront about that. And their argument is say what you want to use it for. School districts work differently because the finance formula really limits what you can spend or raise. That's why I think we've been successful of staying out of it so far.
Well, I'm sorry, but just the devil's in the details on these bills, and it became apparent there's a lot of taxing entities. It kind of mandates notification, basically. And there's a lot of small taxing entities that would basically have to raise their mill levy to raise the money to send out the notification. So
This bill in a similar form passed a year ago and was vetoed. So we'll be back to see whether that happens again. Just very quickly, a couple of things tomorrow. Senate Transportation at 8:30 has a hearing on Senate Bill 25, which would prohibit the use of mobile phones by individuals under 18 in any cases, I believe, and the use in a school or construction zone. We're not testifying on that, but you may want to be aware of that. And then at 9 o'clock, House Federal and State Affairs having hearings on 3 different bills dealing with concealed carry license, one of which would allow a provisional license for people 18 to 21, which of course could include high school age students, but it does not change where you can have these weapons concealed or not. But again, that's one we are not weighing in on specifically, but if you have concerns, you may want to follow that. And then Senate Education at 1:30, I'll just note there's a hearing on Senate Bill 32, which would allow school districts to pay the tuition, all or part of tuition and costs of high school students in dual or concurrent enrollment courses with post-secondary. One of the things we hear is that some kids can't take advantage of these programs because of the cost of tuition. This would mean if your school district wanted to do so, particularly if you negotiated a rate, you could pay it. We're supporting that. And then a hearing on a bill in the K-12 Budget Committee again, dealing with basically directing school districts to use data and allocate dollars to improve student achievement, but not specifying what that would be, but saying we have to do it. So our concern is that it kind of implies there's something you should be doing without actually mandating it. So we are going to weigh in on that. Leah, are there any bills you're looking at? I'm just quickly scanning.
I wanted to clarify real quickly. The reason we're not testifying on that concealed carry bill is that, for folks who may not know, the law requires that if someone has a concealed carry permit, they may not bring that, say they're a teacher or a para, they may not bring that weapon into the school. They have to lock it in their vehicle and out of sight. And this bill will not change that law. And so that's why we are not testifying on that. I also wanted to note real quickly that we did provide some written testimony today in favor of the emergency medications at school bills. So just wanted to let people know about that. Other than that, I don't think I have much more to add.
Okay, so that takes us through Wednesday. Tomorrow we'll be back with you to talk about Thursday. Always a reminder, Wednesday afternoon to Thursday morning is when we get the hearing for the next week. So we'll start getting a sense of when some other hearings are happening. We've said all along, the legislature seems to be kind of trying to move fast on things. So we will keep you posted as best we can. As always, if you have any questions about these or any other issues, contact any one of us. We'll try to help you out. Have a great evening.